Yeah, let me start by answering about one of the father of the Green Revolution, which is the type of research that led to improved varieties, high-yielding varieties, and intensification of agriculture. He was a great Indian scientist. His name was Professor Swaminathan. And he just passed away yesterday at the age of 98. I met him last time in July because his foundation, the Swaminathan Foundation, was organizing a workshop in India on the mighty millet. Why am I starting from there? Because Professor Swaminathan was considered a father of the Green Revolution together with Borlaug. He managed to increase the yield of wheat in India from 500 kilograms per hectare to more than 6 tons per hectare. And yet, after he achieved all of this, meaning providing food for population that was starving, continuous famine in India, he realized that this Green Revolution approach, which relies on improved varieties and inputs, had its own limitation. And the limitation was environmentally. The soils were killed by excessive use of fertilizer. Nutritionally, we were forgetting traditional food that were so important for our balanced diets, in which millet is obviously one. And so it is, to me, very interesting to see that a country like India, which is a place where the Green Revolution started, to be the country that actually proposed to the United Nations General Assembly to declare 2023 as the year of millet. And it shows that it is important to increase yield, because that is important to feed the population, but it's also important not to forget about other crops. And the millet, to me, are epitomizing of these other minor neglected crops. So from when I see it is a great, and for the research that I've been doing in the past 20 years on this minor crop, it's really important that this comes from a country like India. Now let me bring this to Kenya and to Africa. Kenya and Africa are an important center of origins for many millets. In Kenya, we have finger millet, sorghum, and Kenya is one of the center of origin. If you move to other parts, you have teff in Ethiopia or fonio in West Africa. This is to say that there are many millets, and the nutritional value of these millets are sometimes several times more than the major cereals, and so they are an important contributor to our diets. But it's also a recognition of the importance of these forgotten crops. In a work that we were doing with FARA, the Forum for Agricultural Research in Africa, which is called the Forgotten Crop Manifesto Action Plan, we found out that 44% of these forgotten crops are actually from Africa. And why this is important? It is important because it means that not only Africa is rich in biodiversity, but maybe also because Africa didn't invest as much as other parts of the world into their forgotten crops, and how they can contribute to address the multiple challenges that we face today: climate change, malnutrition, land degradation, biodiversity loss, deforestation. And if we would bring those forgotten crops and millets again into the radar, then we would probably have a better portfolio of solutions to address those challenges. Agriculture in Africa started about 5,000 years ago. And those crops, like the millets, they were domesticated like 5,000 years ago. What does it mean? Is that even if now we have an accelerated climate change, still those crops underwent a lot of climate variability in those 5,000 years. The climate in Kenya was not the same 5,000 years as it is now. Those crops underwent different type of pests and diseases pressure, and they developed traits that makes them adapted to those new pests and diseases. And one of the consequences of climate change is that pest and disease pressure or new pests and diseases will appear because of the changing environment. And within those crops, you have answers to some of those challenges. In addition, they will play a very important role. It's like when you go to your financial advisor and in a time of crisis, and the financial advisor would let you know, would advise you to diversify your investment. It will tell you, you put some money here, some money there, some in corporate, some in bonds, etc. You diversify the risk. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. And those minor crops, they play exactly that role, and particularly for the smallholder farmers, because they allow them to diversify the risk, and because many of them are actually well adapted to the current climatic condition, but also to the future ones. To me, what we need is what we say a whole-of-basket approach. So we need to have a diet that is balanced and that has all the kind of nutrients that we need. So alongside with millet, and alongside with maize, alongside with wheat, we also need to have all sorts of other crops. And one example that comes to my mind is the vegetables, and particularly the traditional vegetables. And why I'm mentioning the traditional vegetables? They will almost, when we start working as the Alliance of Bioversity and Ciat on these crops, it's multiple species, 24 species, those they were almost never available in supermarkets, they never existed. And they were replaced by the modern crops, modern vegetables, the kale, the Chinese cabbage, etc. And these were perceived as modern crop, and so people didn't want to consume these traditional crops, vegetables that were aligned to the poverty and old way of living. Now you find them everywhere. And one great recognition of the importance of these crops is, first of all, scientifically, they provide much more nutrients than the modern vegetables. They contribute much better to the livelihood of the farmers. And the result of all of this research that we did together, for example, the National Museum of Kenya, is that these traditional vegetables are now recognized by UNESCO as an intangible cultural heritage, which is not something so easy to achieve. But it shows that I think it's something that Kenya should be proud of, that something like their traditional vegetables have this such high level recognition. But this is one side. The other side is, again, that we have 25% of our children undernourished. We have 12.5 million Kenyans who don't have access to adequate food. And these crops, the combination of these crops, the vegetables, the millets, are part of the solution to reduce this level of malnutrition and undernutrition. I think a new platform, new agreements are needed between the actors that you mentioned, the government, the private sector, the development, the research, the farmers. But just let's be clear. The climate change is one, and I'd like to see the climate change as interlinked with the other crises that I mentioned. So at the agricultural sector, it varies depending on the estimate, but is responsible between 25 to 35% of the greenhouse gas emissions. So it's a major contributor to climate change. 80% of deforestation happens because agriculture expands. 86% of species got extinct because of agriculture, either directly because of the deforestation or indirectly because of pollution. The percentage, the malnutrition crisis, they are all interlinked, and they're all part of an agricultural system where, which is not sustainable. It doesn't allow, it provides a good amount of food in terms of calories, and so it allows to feed the people. I mentioned before the case of India, but as Swaminathan already recognized, it also comes with very serious consequences, and so his foundation is really looking for the sustainable solution. So the father of the Green Revolution acknowledged that the Green Revolution itself is not enough. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't do breeding. The research should improve the millets. There is scope for it. The same way yield production of wheat in India moved from 500 kilo to 5-6 tons per hectare, shows that it's important that we need to have this yield increase in the millets and in these other minor crops. But we need to have research investing on this. And that research invests where there is money. So we need government to allow for the research on this to take place, and we need for development support to have this research to take place. Secondly, if we want to really have a sustainable production system, we need to recognize that we cannot invest just on maize monoculture or wheat monoculture. We need to have diversified agriculture, which is regenerative. The soils are degraded. We need to regenerate, because otherwise they become sterile, and yield is already predicted to decrease as a combination of climate change and soil degradation by 20–30% for maize, for example. We need to have more trees on farm, because the trees also regulate the climate. We need to have a diversification of crops that also allow for the farm, for the soil to be managed in ways that is more conducive to soil health. So intercropping, crop rotation, legumes with cereals, agroforestry system. These are all part of a package that science demonstrates that can actually contribute to feed a large part of the population. But it's not just feeding. I don't like this word. I prefer nourishing. We need the population to be nourished. We need the population to have the intake of the macronutrient they need. And that can only come if you diversify your production system. And this is where we need that transition to happen. Let me give you another number. Globally, there are $700 billion. You know how much is it? 700 billion is 7 times the GDP of Kenya that goes into supporting agriculture. 95% of those 700 million goes to support improved seeds and fertilizer, and only 5% goes into the transition. So if we are serious about the transition, and if we are serious about funding the transition, obviously a lot of these incentives of the 700 million needs to be diverted into more sustainable agricultural practices. Otherwise, the farmers would not have the right incentive to actually engage on the transition. From my side, I think there is much more awareness about the importance of the millets and in general of investing in more sustainable agriculture. So I think this was a key achievement. It has been discussed not only because of the year of millet and because, for example, India also hosting the G20. It was a big part of the agricultural agreement at the G20 level to diversify production and include millets as an important component of our food baskets. It has been recognized even by the CGIER, who is an important part of the Green Revolution process, but now it's also recognizing alongside the Swaminathan Foundation that it's important to have more investment of millets, including the crop improvement part. So I think it has had some significant impact, but now we need to walk the talk. So in Kenya, we are now developing large farms in Kisumu County, where tens of farmers are involved to develop what we call them the nature-positive farms. So the nature-positive farms are farms that are divided. Now we are thinking of about 1 acre, 100 acre. So it's a big farm. So what will happen in these 100-acre farms is we're going to have different zones. So one zone will be for forest. We have a river. We want to have more trees around the river, but we want also the communities to benefit from those trees. No? So we will put in place beekeeping, for example, or other harvesting of non-timber products. So we want to select the trees in ways that they also benefit the communities. Then we will have agroforestry. Maybe we will have fruit trees and then other crops planted in this agroforestry system. Then we will have the crop areas where we will plant the sorghum, the maize, in a crop rotation scheme. So we will have roots and tubers, forage, vegetables, etc. Then we will have the forage, because these farms will have animals. And then they will also have an aquacultural part. They will be very modern, because sometimes when you talk about this kind of system, people think that it's how our grandparents were farming. But this is not the case. In this farm, we will make use of digital technologies, modern technologies to monitor soil, to decide what to plant, to develop value chains, digital value chains, blockchains, etc. So it's going to be very modern. And I think that this will attract youth, because the youth will have now we need very specialized need to manage these modern technologies and to have youth engage. When I was in the AGRF meeting last couple of weeks ago in Tanzania, His Excellency President Ruto made a very important statement. While the average age of a farmer in Kenya is over 50 years old, the average population, the median population of Kenya is 19.6 years old. It means the youth don't do farming. And why they don't do farming? Because they don't want to go with the plow, with the hoe to plow a piece of land. But if you link them, if you link farming with technologies, with modern tools, with increased income, the youth will be into that. And as for the women, they have a lot of knowledge. And I want to emphasize this, that a lot of the knowledge you asked me several times about the millets, about these traditional crops, the millets is in women's hand. They know in women's brain. They know how to cook them, how to prepare, how tough it is to maybe hull them. They know what nutritional characteristics they have. And so we need to translate that traditional knowledge that women have into something that can improve their livelihood and raise their profile in the whole agricultural spectrum. So what we will do for them is to train them, to give them income opportunities, and to make sure that the knowledge is captured and valued in the joint research projects with them. If people would know about how important these food are for our well-being, for the growth of our children, for having them growing healthy and strong, I think that would be an important trigger for increased consumption. This doesn't mean that people wouldn't go to KFC or other fast food type of food. They can have it. I mean, diets are beautiful because they can be mixed and people can enjoy a diversity of food. But I think it's an awareness. And when you look at the investment that the companies made to promote their fast food, and the investment that generally is made to promote the traditional food, there is no balance. And the companies do the investment because they know that by doing that investment, they can convince people to consume more of this food. I think it's a duty of the government to educate, and so it's the government somehow and NGOs and other actors in the nutrition sphere to also raise more that awareness in schools, for example, school feeding programs on the importance of consuming some of these traditional crops. Not because, and maybe make them fancy, no? Maybe also call for a chef and have chef preparing fancy food for using these traditional crops. There is a manifesto, a chef manifesto, which is global and which is also in Kenya, which really tries to promote this type of food. And we know that chefs are influencers. So let's use all possible avenues to promote them. I think now we are in the planning stage with these farming communities to actually make the zoning and start planting some of the trees. What I expect that in terms of mitigation, there are two dimensions. One, soil. Soil is a carbon sink. The places where we are working is degraded. If we improve the capacity of the soil to sink carbon, this will contribute to mitigation. Secondly, the idea of planting trees both around the river but also in this agroforestry setting will also act as a mitigation element. And so what we expect is that we will be able to demonstrate that this kind of farm can actually contribute to mitigation to climate change, as well as to adaptation, because we will carefully select using the best science available for the type of crops, of seeds, including indigenous crops and indigenous seeds that can really feed that area and can maximize profit and productivity of this farm. We will bring all of this into COP28. We had some presentation in the African Climate Week. We had some of the products and the seeds and the end products that we want to promote through the Nature Positive. We will escalate this at COP, so at the global level. And after 2 years, we hope that this can become a model for a different way, more sustainable farming that doesn't undermine food security, because this is very important to maintain, but that improves nutrition and is good for people and the planet. So at COP28, we will be very much aligned to the year of millet. So we will present a number of initiatives in Asia, Africa, and Latin America on how these neglected crops and the millets can actually become an important part of agriculture. And what we will call for is to have the coalition that I was talking alone, because we need to have more funds to fund the transition. And this is one thing that can happen in this climate COP. There is a lot of climate finance, there is a lot of funds that are pledged, included for mitigation and adaptation in agriculture. And we think that through Nature Positive, we have a very good framework for attracting those funds. Because without money, we don't go very far. And I would like to add maybe one last point, if you allow me. Private sector. If we want to produce millets, if we want to diversify other production, say that these Nature Positive farms in Kisumu will have maybe 25 crops in rotation, in spacing, fruits, vegetables, cereals, legumes, etc. We need to make a product out of it. Our entry point is not the crops and the farm. Our entry point is the livelihood and the income of the people, and for that we need the private sector. We know that there are very good private sector that value those crops and are experimenting on those crops, but we need, if we want to bring this at scale, we need more of them. We need to have private sector that is very much familiar with social awareness, so that redistributing a little bit the income, but also that do research together with us, together with the research institution, on how best to use those new products that will inevitably come into the market. And that private sector engagement remains challenging and needs to be mainstreamed as well. I think I make a call for consumers to not be to really be aware of the importance of consuming this diversity of crops, and because that's the other big ally. We need the private sector, but also we need the consumers that will trigger demand and hence will encourage farmers to grow. These are good for your children, they're good for you, they're good for the planet, they're good for the economy and the livelihood of the farmers, and so don't consider them as the crop of the past, but see them as the crop of the future.